A very good evening to one and all gathered here for the D Srinivasan Institute Chair Lecture. I am Jennifer from the Office of Alumni and Corporate Relations. I extend a warm welcome to all the distinguished guests, the faculty, the students, and my colleagues from the ACR office. I request all of you to please rise for the Tamil Thai Valtu, followed by our national song, Vande Mataram.
நீராறும் கடலுடுத்த நிலமடந்தை கெழிலொழுகும் சீராறும் வதனமென திகழ்பரத கண்டமிதில் தெக்கணமும் மதில் சிறந்த திராவிடனல் திருநாடும் தக்க சிறு பிறை நுதலும் தரிதனரும் திலகமுமே அத்திலக வாசனை போல் அனைத்துலகும் இன்பமுற எத்திசையும் புகழ் வணக்க இருந்த பெரும் தமிழனங்கே தமிழனங்கே உன் சீரிழமை திறம்பியந்து செயல் மறந்து வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே.
I take this opportunity to invite Professor Mahesh Panchagnula, Dean Alumni and Corporate Relations, to deliver the welcome address.
Good afternoon. It's a delight to welcome everybody to the D Srinivasan Institute Chair Lecture, which will be given by Professor R.I. Sujit. Let me first welcome Mr. Sridhar and family for this for first creating the chair in the name of Mr. D Srinivasan, his father, who was a pioneer in the field of acoustics, underwater acoustics in India. Back when we needed our own sonar and our own sonar technology, he was one of the lone warriors to fight it out and do what he can at the national at the NPOL in Kochi, where he did most of his work. So it's very befitting that we have the lecture being given by Sujit, which is going to be part acoustics. You see the word singing flames, and part combustion. You see the part in the burning questions. So it's really a delight to be part of this institute and share coffee with colleagues like Sujit, who go very deep into their subject. They have a passion to go deep. That is what makes academia very rewarding. I think a few of the colleagues who choose to go deep in a field that is not exactly up on everybody's radar is what differentiates colleagues like Sujit from others who sort of play the game by the flavor of the day. Many of us do that. There's nothing wrong with that actually, because you are helping a cause that is more immediate. But some of us who stay deep and stay committed to a particular area of research, whether it is up on the funding agency's radar or not, actually end up making an impact. I've seen this in my own experience of having been in academia both in the US and in India, where people who, I'll give you one example. I remember a gentleman I used to play tennis with who was a colleague of mine in the Department of History at a university I taught. For 35 years before the Iraq War, he had researched the Kurds in Kurdistan. Nobody had, he had gone, lived with the Kurds. When the Iraq War broke out, the government needed to understand Kurdish culture and understand who the Kurds are. And there was nobody in the US except him. So everybody has to be a scholar in their pursuit. And to the younger students in this audience, I'd like to leave you with this take home, that it is important for you to become a scholar in your own field. And you should be the go-to person in that field. In fact, Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy gave a talk just a few days ago at the Prime Minister's Research Fellowship Symposium, where he said, you are doing a PhD to become a Vidwan, was the word he used. In your field, you should be the Vidwan. In Urdu, there's a beautiful word called Ustad. In your field, you should be the Ustad. I'll say Sujit is the Ustad in thermoacoustics globally. I want to take this opportunity to also talk a little bit about our office. I think the Office of Alumni and Corporate Relations works with several well-wishers, donors, and companies to enable IIT Madras to grow in many different directions. And one of the directions is to create reward structures for our faculty members through chair professorships. We're particularly grateful to all our donors, well-wishers, in particular Mr. Sridhar and family, who have chosen to endow this chair in his father's name. And we invite everybody to be part of these kinds of efforts in the future. And I look forward to the talk as much as everyone in this audience is today. Thank you all again.
Thank you, Professor. I will now read the citation on Dr. D Srinivasan. Dr. Devanatha Srinivasan was active professionally for about 65 years, well into his mid-80s. His areas of interest spanning underwater acoustics, ultrasonics, physical oceanography, and sonar technology. He had a brilliant academic record, standing first in Madras Presidency SSLC, first in Madras University Intermediate, and BSc Honours. After working as a lecturer in physics at the Madras Christian College and later at the National Physical Laboratory, he earned a PhD at the University of Missouri, where he worked as a faculty member. He headed the Naval Physical and Oceanographic Laboratory for almost 2 decades from 1962. He pioneered work on underwater acoustics and sonar technology, laying the foundation for research and development of global best-in-class sonar systems, the first of which was inducted into the Indian Navy in 1982. He concurrently headed the Naval Science and Technological Laboratory at Vizag, where he initiated the development of anti-submarine torpedoes, which have since been inducted into service. Post-superannuation in 1985, Dr. Srinivasan was attached to IIT Madras, Department of Physics and Department of Ocean Engineering, and later with the National Institute of Ocean Technology. He was a co-founder and president of the Acoustical Society of India, the Ultrasonic Society, and the mentor of the Ocean Society of India. He was associated with all national marine research institutions. He was a recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award of DRDO in 2005, the Lifetime Achievement Award of the Department of Ocean Development, the Albert Einstein Prize of the University of Missouri, the Vasavik Award, the Salvan Prize, the UGC Award, Hari Om Ashram Award, Professor S. Bhagavatam Oration, etc. He has published extensively and was the principal author of a book on acoustic transducers. We are indeed elated to have an institute chair named in honor of Dr. D Srinivasan at IIT Madras. Thank you, sir. I now take this opportunity to introduce Mr. S. Sridhar. Mr. S. Sridhar is an alumnus of the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and is widely acknowledged to be an innovative, market-oriented banker, having provided transformational leadership to the organizations he had worked in. He is currently the chairman of Strategic Research Information and Capital Services Private Limited. His previous assignments include being the chairman and managing director at the Central Bank of India and also the National Housing Bank, the apex financial institution for housing and the regulator for housing finance companies. Mr. Sridhar was a pioneer in championing the concept of affordable housing in India and contributed significantly to public policy formulation in this regard. Mr. Sridhar was the Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer of the Exim Bank of India, India's apex export financing institution between 2001 and 2006. We are glad to have you in our midst, sir. I now request Professor Mahesh and Mr. Kaviraj Nair, CEO, Office of Institutional Advancement, to felicitate Mr. Sridhar. I now call upon Professor Hutchison Murthy, Head of the Department of Aeroscience Engineering, to introduce the occupant of the D Srinivasan Institute Chair, Professor R.I. Sujit.
It's an honor to be on this stage to introduce my teacher, my colleague, and one of the most accomplished researchers in this country, Professor Sujit. Professor Sujit did his bachelor's from our department, Aerospace Engineering Department, in 1988. I believe he was also a recipient of HAL Prize for Best Academic Performance in that particular year. And then he went to Georgia Tech for his master's and PhD. And then he came back and joined our department in 1995, August. I remember it very well, simply because there is some personal connect there. I joined BTech. I joined for BTech in '94, and in '95 is when, third semester is when we have the first course in department. That is Introduction to Aerospace. He taught us the first course. So we were his first batch of students, and he was our first faculty whom we interacted with in Aero department. Of course, we still remember him getting us ice cream and shakes and creams, and also playing hockey with us. And he has also been one of the most friendly faculty in the department. Even today, whenever we have get together with students, he's always there. He also comes and tries to play cricket and football. And then, so of course, his list of academic achievements are, of course, too long. So it will take a long time to introduce all those things. So to talk about all those things, I will present a very brief summary of all his academic accomplishments. He is a recipient of Alexander von Humboldt's fellowship at the Hans Fischer Senior Fellowship and the Hans Fischer Senior Fellowship of the Institute of Advanced Study of TU Munich. Professor Sujit was the founding editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Spray and Combustion Dynamics and is currently a member of the editorial advisory board of Chaos, an interdisciplinary journal of nonlinear science. He has been awarded the Swarna Jayanti and J.C. Bose fellowships. He is a distinguished fellow of International Institute of Acoustics and Vibration, and is also a fellow of the Combustion Institute, the Indian National Academy of Engineering, and the Indian Academy of Sciences. He has recently been elected as an international fellow of the US National Academy of Engineering. I would think it's way long overdue. IIT Madras has also recently awarded his group a Center of Excellence to study critical transitions in complex systems. Given all his amazing academic accomplishments, he has been an inspiration to a lot of our younger faculty, and he has always been very helpful to support our younger faculty as well. So not only is an accomplished academician, is also extremely helpful in supporting our younger faculty. So I really thank him for that as well. So without taking much time, and I'm sure it's a pleasure to listen to him talk in his field of expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I now request Professor Mahesh to felicitate Professor Sujit. I request Professor Sujit to address the gathering on the topic Singing Flames and Burning Questions.
Can you all hear me well? Can we have that thingy? Yeah, thank you. And we have to change. I'll change it. Yeah, it's okay. Just wait. Close this. This is the one. No? Yeah. Thank you all. It's a very great honor to be here in front of you. I think this is a bit annoying, but we'll ignore it. And thanks to Sridhar and his family, and actually Dr. Srinivasan's family, for funding this chair. And thanks, Mahesh. Thanks to my boss, come student, Professor Murthy. I'm getting a bit overwhelmed, so I think I will stop speaking about it. So I'm a fan of war movies, and Troy is, I've seen several versions of it. And there's a saying in that when Odysseus tells Achilles that war is when old men talk and young men die. So I thought research was something like that. The young students, my students are there, they do all the hard work, and I get the glory, I get to go to places and all that. But I thought I should, thank you. When I was young, my mother used to tell me she was a devotee of Lord Subramanian. She told me that there's a name for him called, I don't know, maybe we don't pronounce it correctly, Kumar Guru, or maybe you say Kumar Guru. So that means that he is small, 3-year-old or whatever, little kid, but Guru of Lord Shiva. So she used to tell me that teachers should be taught by the students. And I was very small, I don't know what I understood, but eventually this was told so many times, even when I grew old. So I grew with the concept, so I thought that was very important. So my gurus are all sitting there. Thank you all so much. So this is my topic, I'll get to that. So singing flames and burning questions. And before I start, I want to acknowledge my brilliant students, postdocs, staff and collaborators with whom I worked over the years. A lot of people funded, maybe it's boring to read them all out, but it's named there. One particular person I want to say is Ramesh Kolar, who supported me for a long decades actually, and Shankaran from AFR really understood, both of them really understood our work. And my mentor, Silke Cross, and my teachers, both from primary school to IIT Madras to Georgia Tech, and administration of IIT Madras, that is the central administration, as well as the aerospace administration, which have been quite supportive. My colleagues and my seniors were always, many of them were there to help me when I needed advice. And most importantly, my family, part of it is here. Thank you all. So this is a very bad picture, but from Dr. Srinivasan's time when he was in NPOL. And this is my uncle, S.T. Thampi, and they were colleagues. So Dr. Srinivasan was the director, and my uncle Thampi was the deputy director. So at that time, I was a little kid in school, and once Professor Srinivasan wanted to see Kanyakumari, Trivandrum, Kovalam, all these things, so he came to our house. So came and stayed for a few days actually. It was very intense actually. So that was the first time I saw a doctor, and I was till then the impression that doctor is someone who puts syringe and give medicine and all that. So then I understood there was PhD, and my uncle told me that he was called Acharya of acoustics or something. I remember the word Acharya. And I asked him, then I understood that this NPOL had something to do with ocean and underwater. So I asked my uncle that acoustics, sound that is in air, then uncle explained to me that this can go to underwater, there's this thing called sonar and blah, 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 which was talked about at the beginning, and I understand that Dr. Srinivasan is a pioneer. And I also remember your sisters very well, Jayanti and Revati. Yesterday, my cousin Sajita Thampi's daughter called and wanted me to specifically convey greetings to them. Unfortunately, Revati couldn't join. But I do remember taking them around to lots of temples and Kanyakumari and all that. So I had fond memories. So when Mahesh called me one day and then said, there's this chair, and do you want to sit in the chair? And then he said, it's under the name of Dr. D Srinivasan, and then who was an acoustics expert, and then lightning flashed and a shiver went down the spine. I said that, and then I immediately called my uncle just to double check, because did he have a son? My name's Sridhar, and then he said, yeah, it's the same guy. He was in IIT Delhi and so on. And then I called back Mahesh and said, I'm deeply honored to, some chair in the name of Acharya of acoustics. That is awesome. Okay, now enough of stories. We'll get to business. So imagine you get a chest pain, heart attack. Yeah, or is it I ate too much sambar or something and acid reflux, and then I don't know, and I don't want to die. So I have this question, and both are identical symptoms, and they're different problems, completely different problems. And I know one is with heart, and so I don't want to take any risk with my heart, so I call 108, and ambulance come, bang, 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 and I get rushed off to the hospital, and then when I go there, they give me this. And then I look like a fool already, and then I get a bill, and then insurance company, they're calling and they're saying, no, we'll not cover, and there's a bill of the ambulance, and drugs, and ambulance driver, and the paramedic, and then the doctor who was supposedly in the ambulance but was never there, and then insurance company says, no, if he died, we would have covered all the expenses. So I look like a fool in front of my wife and kids, go back home, and then the other choice is, this is the most dangerous thing. You think it's acid reflux, I ate something heavy, and I take Digene or whatever, your favorite medicine, and go to sleep and rest in peace. So this is critical transition. So small change, and you can be at different states, and the undesirable transition can happen. And critical transitions observed in nature, society, technological, and economic systems. And a small change in the climate, maybe a few degree or even fraction of a degree change in temperature, can actually change the ecology of a lake, for example. It can drastically change. A forest can become desert, and so on and so forth. So a slight change in the climate can lead to a collapse of an ecosystem. This has some delay. So many complex systems have critical transitions, and epileptic seizure is one example. Asthma attack is another example. Financial crash, this is something wipes out the economies, and critical transitions are often dangerous and catastrophic. There is one critical transition. You play flute, and from turbulent flow becomes nice tone. That is probably the only desirable critical transition. We'll come to that later. Okay, so let's, Mahesh said that I work in combustion and things like that, acoustics. So let's get into a time machine and go back in history sometime in 1960s. And America was trying to go to moon along with Russians, and there was heavy competition. And this is the powerhouse engine, F1 engine, and there are a lot of movies in which they show these engines. And
Sonny Morea is project manager in June 1962, when NASA test fires its first F1.
Close up.
When we tried to fire it for the first time, it just blew apart.
As F1 engines keep blowing up, engineers finally identified the problem. Combustion instability, uneven burning.
Yeah, so what is combustion instability? So there is a feedback between sound and the flame. So the flames are unsteady, they make sound, the sound goes to the boundaries, gets reflected and comes back, further affect the flame, and typically this feedback is going on. So if they cranked up the amplifier on this, you'll get a shrill sound, that is feedback. Same thing, instead of the electronic amplifier, we have the flame doing the amplifying. and it can lead to large amplitude oscillations. So in F1 engine, they were in 100% excess of mean pressure, and the mean pressure of the order of 100 atmospheres. Can you imagine sound of the order of 100 atmospheres? And I have met people who have listened to the sound of combustion instability when it happened, standing many kilometers. Some of them told me that they actually thought they died, and after some time they got up and found that they didn't die. But that was the feeling. It was very monstrous. And this is a picture of a, these pictures are very interesting. There's a picture of a nozzle which flew away from the test stand, found like a kilometer away. And rocket people, they actually, surprisingly, they show a lot of photographs, except that they don't tell which engine this is from. So yeah, these are very nice pictures of disastrous hardware. So they introduce severe thrust oscillations leading to a lot of controllability, endangering payloads and sensors, and heat transfer becomes phenomenal, and the thermal protection system gets overwhelmed, and this whole thing can collapse. And there are many examples of pictures from in the internet. You just Google, you'll see it. And so the thermoacoustic instability leads to catastrophic failure in aero engines and power plants, including the ones which make electricity out of natural gas, or the aeroplane engines and so on. So these are more pictures of destruction. Yeah. So for example, in the 80s, there was this hue and cry about acid rain, and people came up with this technology to have this lean burn technology. The idea was that there's a lot of NO oxides of nitrogen, NO and NO2, and going up, mixing with the water vapor and falling as acid rain. And then they made this technology to reduce it, and then, so the idea was that more oxides of nitrogen form when you have high temperature. So the idea was to reduce the temperature. To reduce the temperature, they actually burned the fuel and air such that there is less fuel and more air. So it's called lean premix pre-vaporized technology. And then they had this thing which works in principle very nicely, put it on the field, and then you see all these things, nuts coming loose, blades. There's a lot of vibrations, and engine had to be tripped. And then, in here we are used to saving our work on the computer, not in America. And then, power goes off, and then lots of, they probably say once in a week or something their work, so lots of economic losses and so on. So losses exceed 1 billion a year for this the power producing engines. For the aero engines and rockets, no one says this thing because they're very devastating, but under the secrecy of national security, you don't tell these numbers until F1 engine is museum piece now, so you can talk about it. During the thing, nobody, I am American, I will say, the French has it, French will say American has it, or Russian has it. So everybody blames each other, but when the problem happens, nobody acknowledges it. Yeah, so I just want to, you saw the F1 engine, so we'll make a little demonstration in here. So this is a tube, like a magic show. There's nothing fancy in it, you can see. Do you see any loudspeaker inside? No, right? So, yeah. So I hope the fire alarm doesn't go on, but we'll just do a quick. Yeah, okay. So they wanted to bring very nice experiments with flames and high-speed cameras and all that, gas cylinders, but I told them that is off the chart. So candle is what probably I can get away with the DIN-ICSR at the moment. So now we want to look at a situation where, like this heart attack versus heartburn. So you're changing some parameter, and you're looking, and this is RMS, is this yellow or orange dot, and you do FFT and find the peak, and that is this blue dot. And then you're looking, and is it going up or is it not going up? And then first you think it's going up, but then no, it's not going up. So it could be two things. It could just be continuing like gently like this, because there's more airflow, it makes more turbulence, more sound. This is not a problem. You shouldn't shut down the engine, because if you shut down the engine, every time an engine is shut down, it takes for example, a power producing engine. It takes half an hour to shut down, another half an hour to bring back up. That's a lot of money lost and a lot of penalties and so on. And so if you do this, you will be fired. Now, the other thing is this kind of a situation. Yeah. So you keep going like this, and suddenly there's a jump, in which case the machine will be destroyed. you won't get fired, your boss will get fired even before you get fired. So you don't know which is which. So you want to know here that in looking at this first 4 or 5 points, that this is okay and this is not okay. So that is the challenge that I'm going to address, okay? Yeah, so the idea is to prognose the onset of an impending instability. I highlight impending because there's a difference between impending instability and incipient instability. So normally they have transducers on, and when their value goes up, then the controllers come in. So that is, it is already born. The instabilities come on actually. So only when the value goes up, the controllers come in. But then instability has already happened, so I have to shut down the engine. But can I know before the amplitude goes up, that is, it is impending, it's going to happen? Like an astrologer, can I predict will something happen? Although nothing has happened apparently. So that is the idea. And so when we were kids, I was a small kid, you were a small kid, when you go to a hospital, they will put us in this stethoscope, they will look at the pulse, or you go to Ayurvedic doctor, they will check nadi. Now we don't do that. The new gen, when they go to hospital, they'll put you in this machine. Doctor is not interested in listening to you, nor is he interested in looking at your pulse or heartbeat or anything. And they have bought these machines and they want to test these things. But I am old-fashioned, as you can clearly see. So can we listen and forecast a transition to instability? That is the question that I'm asking. Okay, so the forecast, combustion instability or thermoacoustic instability, those are the two names we call it. Nowadays they call it combustion dynamics because the cool MBAs have taken over the management. So they want to make it, put a spin and make it sound very nice. So, but it's the same problem, okay. Earlier they used to say that we have to control combustion instability. Now they say you don't solve a problem now, you manage a problem. So you manage the combustion dynamics. That is the MBA thing to it. So you want to listen to it and do it. And there's a big difference. My wife tells me, she's here, that I always hear her, never listen to her. And then what eventually I understood after, I don't know, a lot of years of marriage is that hearing is understanding the meaning of what is said, but how it is said, the fluctuations and all that you have to check. So in our translating into an engineering thing, hearing is like looking at the RMS or FFT peak. Listening is looking at the true fluctuations. Okay, that's the idea. So then we will get precursors that you know that something is happening, you can forecast. And this is the holy grail of thermoacoustics, to tell it before it happens. So predicting combustion instability before it happens. So how close are we to thermoacoustic instability? I want to know this. The signature will look something like this. You cannot see any change in the amplitude. But you want to look at the signal, the microstructure of the signal, and should be able to tell, okay, something is going to happen or not, before it has happened. It is difficult to predict critical transition because the system hardly shows any change before the onset of instability, onset of the transition. And so we develop what is called early warning signals for abrupt transitions to be able to tell if something will happen or not. So I thought I will think like a school kid and ask some very fundamental questions. So before I study instability, if I have to study instability, I should know what is stability. So how does it operate stably? Second question is, I thought people are studying stable operation, unstable operation. I thought we should look at the transition as we go from stable to unstable. Okay. The third thing, I want to know what happens during the onset as the instability happens, because everything in the literature till this point was when it is completely stable or when it is completely unstable. Okay, as it just becomes unstable, what happens? And if I could answer these questions, I could identify precursors and can have a control algorithm which will give better margins. So these were the combustors. They were classical dumb combustors with one had swirl and one had bluff body. I'm not going to say anything more than the combustor, but you can say that we burn fuel and air, and if it works well, it will be low amplitude fluctuations. If it is burning if it's burning in an undesirable way, you will get large amplitude sound. So that much only I'm going to say. So this is how it looks like, the combustor, the picture, and those are the dudes who designed this combustor. Vishnu is a professor in IIT Hyderabad. Dilesh is in applied mechanics department here. I don't know if he's still around. And this is how the thing looks when you are running. But we also had this is the nice version of the setup. We also had an ugly version of the setup, and without any nice optics and all that, because we wanted to have a rugged setup. So I had two teams develop this. One was given less money, the other one given a lot of money. So this is the rugged one. And even then they managed to put a lot of transducer, but I told them that you have to close it all. I want only one transducer, and although I had more transducers at that time, I just wanted to use one transducer. And with one transducer, I want to be able to tell whether instability will come or not. Because in the industry, a real engine, you cannot put 25 transducers or 10 transducers. You can put one transducer at the most 2. Okay. So what exactly is stable operation? So during this stable operation, because these real engines operate in turbulent conditions, the engine is never really silent. It has low amplitude, periodic oscillations. Okay. So this is called combustion noise, although it's not quite noise, it is sound. So in that sense, but it's actually chaos. So what is combustion noise? So combustion noise is actually deterministic chaos. We have shown that. I think it will take me a 2-hour lecture to do this, and I'm going to stay away from that. So a chaotic time series generally has a self-similar structure with patterns filling non-integer dimensions. Okay. So if you zoom into the signal, so this is the signal, it's a zoomed signal, and again you zoom in, you see similar patterns. Okay. So it's like I don't know, one of those horror movies. You zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, you still see the same thing. And yeah, so this is the concept of self-similarity. So instead of writing an equation of self-similarity, I'm going to write a poem. It's not my poem, somebody's poem. Clouds are not spheres, mountains are not cones, coastlines are not circles, nor does lightning travel in straight line. I think you probably by now you know who said this. Mandelbrot, yeah. So this is the poem from his book, Fractal Geometry of Nature. So nature doesn't make boxes and spheres and rectangles and so on. Nature makes rough objects. Nature has self-similarity. Go out and watch the tree. It will be, a tree will have, a branch is there, it will branch into other branches. It will subsequently do several times. Or our own human body. So if you look at our blood vessels or air passages in the lungs, it actually, the airways branch 26 times. And so this is self-similar structure. So you zoom in with a zoom lens. That is, or a different scale. So that is this P of Ct equal to P of T. So that is even at different scale, you can zoom in at a kilometer level or a meter level or a millimeter level, you see the same thing. That's what this formula means, nothing more than that. Different zooms, you get the same kind of structure. You zoom in or zoom out, you see the same kind of pattern. So nature displays self-similarity. Okay, and you can write poems about nature. But what about turbulence flow? Okay, we are aerospace engineers in the business of killing people with engines and all that, unfortunately. Why would a businessman in aerospace care? I mean, they want to make a more efficient jet engine, more efficient rocket, more efficient missiles. Sadly, that is the case. But they do care because it is turbulent flow, and turbulent flow is self-similar. So this is a poem from Richardson, who wrote big balls and little balls that feed on their velocity, and little balls have lesser balls, and so on to viscosity. So turbulent flows are self-similar. So this is a very nice picture from atmospheric sciences. I purposely stayed out of aerospace destructive stuff. You can see clouds, and this is a zoom of this, and this is a zoom of this, and you'll see same kind of structures again and again. So yeah, so you can see there's a galaxy which is, so nature displays this kind of patterns very nicely. And so to study self-similarity, there is a subject called fractals, and fractals, they give the ideal thing. This is a fractal broccoli, and you can, I don't know if it's real or artificial. It's very hard to make out actually. And actually it turns out that the mountains are fractal, and many of the mountains you see in movies, they are actually computer graphics generated with multifractal algorithms, okay? And they look so genuine, so I don't know, I cannot make out whether this is real or not. So what is fractal dimension? So we know dimensions, line has one dimension, a box has 2 dimensions, rectangle has 2 dimensions, square has 2 dimensions, a sphere or a box has 3 dimensions, and so on. So this is a rhetoric question asked by Mandelbrot. How long is the cost of Britain? And this is very interesting because we can take a picture at different scales and you get a different answer. So imagine you are flying, or you've taken a satellite picture and then you calculate using your ruler and magnification factor, you'll get a length. Now you're on a high flying aeroplane like SR-71 or something. You get another one. You are on a 10 kilometer altitude or you're on a lower altitude. Your length, perimeter will keep increasing. And in the end, even if you are driving on the coast, you'll get even farther length. And if you're walking, you'll get even higher length, because as you zoom in, you see more and more wrinkles which were not visible in the earlier zoom level. Okay, so if you plot the perimeter versus the scale size, you will get a in a log plot, it will have a straight line, or it's actually a power law. And so the perimeter depends on the size of the ruler, and this slope is called the fractal dimension. So now this is the fractal dimension of a geometric object. So we want to look at fractal dimension of a time series. So for a fractal, if the time series fractal, measures of dispersion such as standard deviation will not converge. Okay, so we plot log of RMS of standard deviation. That's a measure, RMS of standard deviation versus log of time scale, and this will diverge over certain levels of certain times. Okay, so this slope is called Hurst exponent, named after the famous Hurst who studied the dams and so on, civil engineer. So a white noise will have a slope of half. This is a classical result from physics, and a sine wave, which is a Euclidean nice smooth object, that will have no scaling. It will have a slope of 0. But this sound from the combustors, they have something in between. Okay, so that is so that means the sound is having fractal characteristics. Okay, if it's in between these two limits. So now this is something you would be interested. So in signals, there are 3 types of signals: persistent, anti-persistent, and white noise. So persistent is something you hope when the stock market is going up, you bought, and the stock continues to go up, continues to go up, continues to go up. This is what you hope. Actually, often when I buy, it goes down. And anti-persistent is, if something happened today, tomorrow opposite will happen. Okay, so it's raining today, tomorrow will be sun, and then if tomorrow it's sun, day after tomorrow it could be rain. And white noise is what happens today has nothing to do with what happens yesterday, and what happened today will not affect what happened tomorrow. Okay, so it's like a random behavior. So combustion noise, what I really call combustion chaos, but combustion noise is a term used by the community, that actually has, it is sound. Sound is some fluctuation which goes up and down, up and down. So it has to have, by definition, anti-persistent characteristics. Okay, so signals with single scaling are called monofractals. So if you plot that log of standard deviation versus time scale, and you get a single slope, you will get monofractals. But nature is much more complex. Okay, so people gave this description of fractal description of turbulent flow and found that it was not adequate because it was more complex, and people had to develop a multifractal theory. That means there are lots of fractal dimensions, not just one fractal dimension. There's a set of fractal dimensions, and I think it's more involved, but there are small amplitude fluctuations, large amplitude fluctuations. So different amplitude fluctuations scale different way because it's really complex. So that is the idea of complexity. So this is the only formula I'll show. I was told that I should not go too technical. So this is a generalized structure function. So if you look, those of you who are inclined to see this, if Q is 2, that's when whatever log of RMS of standard deviation. But if Q is positive number, you will focus on high amplitude because you power something big by a positive power. Let's take 10 and power it by 2. 100 is big number. But if you take 10 and power it by a small number, minus 2, then becomes 0.01. It's a small number. So a Q positive is like a filter focusing on high amplitude. Q negative will focus on lower amplitude. Okay, so that much only I'm going to say. So if you look at the scalings now, white noise will have scaling of half. Periodic will not have scaling, so it will be 0 slope. And this monofractal, there will be each of the structure function will have constant slope. But combustion noise, which is our real sound coming from the combustor, each structure function has a different slope. So it's complex. So you can actually plot these slopes, Q through Hurst exponent versus Q, and that will be a broad spectrum, which you can convert with lots of transformation. I'm not going to get into it, into a spectrum of this form. What it means is these are the scales available, and this is the fraction of that scale which is there in the set. I'm not going to say anything more than that, but basically this broad spectrum shows that in stable operation you have multifractal characteristics. Okay, multifractal means there are lots of fractal dimension within this set. So this is the finding: combustion noise is multifractal. So what? So the thing is, this can help us distinguish the signal. So when you have white noise, it is just a blip here. When you have periodic, it's a blip here. But for real combustors, for stable operation, you have broad spectrum. Okay. So, and this multifractality, this shows that there is a multifract signal, but when it becomes periodic oscillation, that's when our instability comes, it collapses. So multifractality should disappear at the onset of instability, okay. Now, is this happening abruptly or smoothly? Because if it is abrupt, then I have no hope, it will just happen. But if it's smooth, then there is a possibility that I can get some measures and know bit in advance, okay. So go back to basics always, stable to unstable is this thing called combustion noise, which is low amplitude, periodic chaotic sound, to periodic oscillation, which is full-blown instability, okay. So we go from chaos to order, which is the transition from stable to unstable. And so this is my office, many of you have come. And this is typical IIT Madras professors. If you go to NAC building, you'll see that. So you let me in that room, I will make it like this very soon. But the reverse, chaos to order, that is what we are investigating, okay. So that's what I need to investigate regarding my room also. So how do we go from chaos to order? So I will play some sounds because it's acoustics, and what is acoustics without real signals? So I'll play first stable operation. This is called combustion roar. No particular tone. It's very ugly sound. But this is what how a combustor which is stable will sound like. Okay. Now I'll play unstable. Maybe it will be too loud. So this is like a tone, one particular frequency, and it actually be very loud. Here the amplitude is limited by the capacity of the loudspeakers. Okay, and now I'll play in between these two. So you can see the roar in the background. Every now and then it's trying to burst out. Okay, so I have to tell a story. So when we were doing this experiment, and we had set up this combustor, and I told them that I am an expert in combustion, I can run it and all that, and then I messed up 3 times, and then they told me, you stay there in the corner and we will run the experiment. And then I told, okay, now I already messed up so many times, I don't want to create more trouble, I'll stand in the corner. And the students ran the experiment. But I could watch them, and I was watching Vineet, who is now a professor at Bombay, he is a professor at Cochin. So Vineet's shoulders were getting very tensed up actually. And the sound was changing and he was getting stressed up. It was not getting louder, but he was getting very stressed. And suddenly the instability came, or not suddenly, eventually, and then he became relaxed. So I understood that there was something inbuilt in us which knows about this thing that is happening. So next run I was looking at Mr. Professor Girish's face, a very handsome guy at that time, and he started getting lines on the face. And instability came, the lines disappeared. So I understood that we know something intuitively. The issue is to translate it into mathematical physics. Okay, so this is a combustion noise signal, low amplitude, aperiodic. Having some trouble with this. This is the unstable operation, periodic. This is a zoomed in version. This is periodic, and this is intermittency. So in between chaos and order, you have intermittency, where you have bursts or periodic oscillations amidst epochs of periodicity. Okay. So intermittency presages the onset of thermoacoustic instability in turbulent flows. That was the discovery we made, and we see the same behavior not only in thermoacoustic system, but we saw it in aeroacoustic system, in aeroelastic systems, and so on. And I just want to demonstrate it with this aeroacoustic system, flute. We have nice experiment and all that, but I think we need compressed air and so on. So you'll have to do with this. So I'll make a stable operation which is no sound at all, and then I'll make an unstable operation, and then we will have something in between. So if I did not know how to play this thing, maybe I don't know, I will get a full sound. Okay, and if I learn around my bifurcation parameter is the angle and the pressure on the lips. So this is a note. But in hostel you would have seen people trying to learn, and they will, yeah. I'm not blowing intermittently, my blowing is steady, but this is coming, so if you cannot make out the sound, I will play on with a higher frequency. That is so that is a tone, and in between. So this is what is this intermittent playing is what really in the hostel, it really annoys the neighbors and so on. Okay, so this is not just for thermoacoustic instability, but for everything. Okay, so we go from combustion noise, which is low amplitude chaos, through intermittency to full-blown instability. That is our discovery, and not just thermoacoustics, but any aeromechanical instability such as aeroacoustic, aeroelastic, flow-induced vibration, surge, everything which we can imagine with any instability in fluid mechanics and turbulent flows, this is happening. So we need tools and measures to characterize this. We cannot put a graduate student there, look at their shoulders and decide instability is going to come or not. So the Hurst exponent actually is a very good tool. So this plot on this top is the RMS value of the pressure, the orange dots, and the blue is the FFT peak. And you can see in the first 3-4 points, no changes happen, but this thing is plummeted actually. That means we are going head on to a impending instability. Now if you look at here, we see first 10-12 points, no change at all, but you can see this is steadily going towards instability. So those are two different type of combustor. You can get, if you made measurements with my flute also, or aeroacoustics, you will see the same thing. And yeah, so Hurst exponent approaches 0 and the multifractal spectrum collapses. So that is our definition of combustion instability. Earlier we will say it goes about amplitude, but then each combustor you have to set up separate thresholds and so on. So here this is a universal definition of description of instability. So if you go from, if you have this case or this case, you can employ our algorithms and we know that that is the one which is going to trouble. So you know well in advance, okay. So my student Induja, she's finished, she has found a universal scaling law, amplitude proportional to 1 over Hurst exponent squared, so we can predict the amplitude also. And this is valid for not only combustion systems, but for systems, many different systems, some kind of universality. And so we have this precursor detection systems where we can know how far we are from the onset of instability. Also, eventually you can, and the traditional measures, they don't tell this, whereas this tells well in advance. And we can also predict the amplitude. So we have a portfolio of patents on this, several different measures. I'm just showing one of them. And we have a precursor detection technology, which industry has, we have used it. And both in the liquid rocket as well as, in liquid rockets we didn't use it live, but it was to predict what happens if you push the parameter, also in gas turbine industry, and there's a ether. So comes to complexity. Complexity is, as I said, lots of different scalings. And the onset of thermoacoustic instability corresponds to loss of complexity. The multifractal spectrum collapsing is actually saying that nature has gone, it prefers complex system, but we are messed up and it's going to collapse and loss of complexity. Now, the problem with us engineers is that the moment we get something like this, we immediately, without thinking, we'll go into a signal and noise paradigm. So what is the signal, what is the noise, filter it out, and then, but that is, we trash the irregular fluctuation. It's not noise, it's chaos, and that has all the value. That's what tells us how we can get early warning and so on. But we trash it. That is our instinct as an engineer, but I think here it's failing. It is, so the signal plus noise paradigm, it's good for lots of things, but seemed inadequate to describe the onset of an impending instability because turbulence is actually high dimensional chaos. So the irregular fluctuations hold the key. Don't throw them out. So I start with heart. So compare, of course, combustion, people often say that combustor is the heart of a gas turbine engine and so on. Just to say that their subject is the most important thing. So transition from combustion noise to instability or order, it corresponds to loss of multifractality. Now, if you look at congestive heart failure, it is actually a loss of multifractality. So actually, many other things are loss of multifractality. The onset of migraine, the headache, is actually loss of multifractality. So nature, when it works well, is actually complex, fractal, multifractal. And when these things are lost, we lose it. And the system is not working well. The health is lost. So this is an ad from, even this was before, predates the iWatch and so on. It's a Japanese one from Toyota. So, you don't think you'll get a heart attack. So we go to hospital after we get a heart attack. But you people, Japanese are very stressed people. And a lot of people die in Japan with heart attack because they work very hard, unlike us. Now we are also working hard, so maybe we'll also start dying. And so, you think that somebody else will get, we don't get. So, but Japanese are very clever. So they decided that they are not going to come to hospital, so we'll go to them. The Japanese have cars, and they're known for auto industry. So they put these electrodes in the steering. And then as soon as you get on the car and you hold the steering, it wouldn't let you crank if you're going to have a heart attack. So apparently you can get up to 4-day warning, that is the best performance. Sometimes it may be a few hours. So if it is 4 days, it'll let you drive to the hospital. But anything smaller than that, it will bring the ambulance, ambulance will come, okay? So, and now it is more accessible, this technology, in your iWatch and so on. So we have same technology for health of the combustor, okay? So now I just want to talk a little bit about complex system. I just want to play some movies and color and all that. So thermoacoustic system is a complex system, and we can view thermoacoustic instability turbulent combustor as order emerging from chaos. There is a chaotic thing and order is emerging from that. And we therefore we'll have see complex spatiotemporal dynamics. But my wife sent me this, she's sitting here, this academic translator. So it said a complex phenomenon means I don't understand. So this was people who are doing complexity science where physicists don't consider it as proper physics. Engineers, they will get very angry if you say what your subject is complex. My subject is more complicated than your subject. How dare you say complex? So complicated and complex are very different things. So till our fortune changed last year when Nobel Prize was given to 3 people working in complex system theory. Now physicists are recognized, everybody is recognizing, so I'm very happy. So I will play a movie. So it's a very instructive movie. And you may think that I lost my mind, that's okay.
Huge flocks of synchronized starlings create beautiful sights of moving dark clouds. The phenomena was spotted in the skies of southern Israel
These
on
are
Saturday.
thousands of birds
Israeli
flying
ornithologists
like
and amateur bird
another
watchers
bird.
flocked to an
So there was a
open field
movie
near
here,
the southern
Indiran or
city
someone,
of
in which they show
Netivot
something
to
like
get a
that.
glance
So
of the
it's
rare
something like that.
phenomenon
But
called
it's all
murmuration.
self-organized.
Professor Yossi Leshem from Tel Aviv University says the synchronized movement is to help the birds find food and to create.
So a complex system, a system with multiple interacting components whose behavior cannot be simply inferred from the behavior of the constituents. So, and complex systems can self-organize. And this thermoacoustic instability is a kind of self-organization. So this is a stable operation. This is the image of the phasors, okay? And you can see that this is like a disorganized way, okay? So there is no problem. When things are disorganized, the amplitudes are low and it doesn't blow. But okay, so now you can see, no, I skipped 2 things. So this is organized one. This is during the undesirable, unstable operation. You can see it's very well organized like the flock of birds. And actually during intermittency, which is this burst and in between epochs of periodicity, you see both behavior. You see organized behavior as well as disorganized behavior. So, so thermoacoustic instability is a result of coupling between subsystems, hydrodynamics, flame and acoustic field, and we use synchronization theory to study this. So yeah, synchronization between these subsystems is going to lead to self-organization. So when you're stable operation, which pressure and heat, they are the ones who go to feedback. So they are actually desynchronized chaos. Then it went to intermittent synchronization. So intermittently they synchronize, and during synchronization it becomes periodic, otherwise it stays chaotic. And then it goes to something, the state called phase synchronization, where the amplitudes have gone up. And then it goes to a state called generalized synchronization, which both signals, one signal can be written as a function of the other signal. But then the amplitudes are very large. Okay, I'm not going to go into any technical details, but we go from desynchronized chaos via intermittent phase synchronization to phase synchronization to generalized synchronization. And there's even more interesting thing, it has complex spatiotemporal dynamics. Because the coupling is spatiotemporal, since this flame is, they treat flame as a compact and so on, but it really is not a compact thing, especially when there is turbulent flow. So this is a nice movie. You can see when during stable operation there are small vortices, but when the system goes to instability, the same vortices actually turn around and become a large structure. Because of the background light you cannot see it nicely. But it's the same vortices, but between them they interact and organize to form a very large structure. Just as the birds, the small birds organized flying like a large bird, it's a very similar analogy. In fact, it is, so interaction at small scale causes self-organization at large scales. And this is how the heat is. This is the heat release rate actually measured optically with high-speed imaging. So this is a stable operation. You can see somewhat desynchronized motion. And this is the velocity and vorticity field. The vectors are velocity vectors, and vorticity is the curl of the velocity field, and they are also disorganized. But now when you have instability, large amplitude oscillation, you can see this is organized motion. It's pumping kind of motion. And you see very large coherent structures emerging, like this flock of birds, very large structures. And we can look at this in a quantitative way because there's a feedback between acoustic pressure and unsteady heat release rate. So you can think of sine wave as going like this, but you can also think of it as going round and round. For example, somebody is running around a stadium. He's running periodically. So that is in the phase. So we can draw the phasors. So if you draw the phasors, so the pressure and heat, you can think about phasors, and you can measure the phase angle. And you can see that during stable operation, the phasors are decoherent, and during thermoacoustic instability, they are really coherent. And for intermittency, during the periodic part, they are coherent. During the aperiodic part, they are incoherent. So now, this is a picture physicists use when they look at paramagnetic ferromagnetic transition, the dipoles. So when you have magnetized, all the dipoles will point aligned in one way. When it is not magnetized, dipoles will be all over the place. So this is a stable operation where the phasors are all over the place. This is thermoacoustic instability where the phasors are lined up, and this is in between we have instability and intermittency, and there part of the flow is organized, part of the flow is disorganized. So this is called a chimera state or chimera state. So chimera is like two head of lion and goat and tail of a snake. In South Indian temples there is a animal or creature called Vyali, so which also has this multiple heads and tail and so on. And these phasors, the ordered and disordered phases, they move around in space. So this, the physicists call it breathing chimera. So now, last part, I want to talk about mitigating the sound, because one thing is if you have early warning, you can avoid it, but now you understood, I show some pictures about the spatiotemporal dynamics. Now I want to close with talking about how to mitigate. So usually we do passive control, and this is done by trial and error. Active control has been demonstrated, but no manager is willing to take the risk because you want to control something, but it can get worse and things can blow up in the air. So nobody is willing to take the risk. The other thing they say is that we want to have the engines operate for lots of hours or even years without inspection, and inspection is expensive. So they would rather take a performance loss with passive control rather than do active control. So this is by trial and error, which is very expensive. Very expensive. So does thermoacoustic system have an Achilles heel? So we'll go to Greek history 102, history of mythology 101. So there was this hero called Achilles, and Achilles was his mother dipped him, holding him heels in river Styx, I think. And so his body is very strong, except the weak part is heel. So heel is where he can get injured. So somebody shot an arrow into his heel, and so heel is a critical region. And so does our system have such a heel? Then if so, we can shoot an arrow or air jet into that place and we can stop the instability. So we want to develop a smart passive control by disturbing a critical region if such a region is available. So we have developed the technology, it's patented, and many papers are there on that. So we construct complex networks. Complex network is, I can construct a network here with any criteria. So a student is connected to professor, or professor is connected to professor, or everybody connected to each other, and so on and so forth. Or another good example would be airports. So this is the airline, this is Emirates route map. So everything is centered in Dubai, that's like a hub, and they are connecting to a lot of places. So these are physical networks where there's an aeroplane transporting people from one place to another. Or you have power grid network where the cables connecting power. But in fluid mechanics, our connections are abstract. So we don't have anything connecting two regions in flow, but we have to connect. So we do weight correlation networks. There are many schemes with which we can find connections to unravel this hidden connection. So here we use a spatial weighted correlation network from the velocity field. So this is the velocity, we get the velocity field on a grid, and this doesn't have to be from experiments. I did experiment because that's what I know, but if you were to design a combustor, we can perform simulations and get the data, and then we can do this calculation and do all this. So we can get this grid, and then we can construct the network, and then we can see, you can look at various network measures. I will not go into that because I think already you are all exhausted with my talk, but you can find regions which are very important for this. For example, if in social network, there are some people who are very influential, and if you influence them, you can influence a lot of people. There are some people who are staying in a corner, like me. If you influence me, no use, because I'm in a corner sitting, nobody knows me, so I'm not going to be of use. But there are some cool dudes. If you influence them, then you will influence a lot of people. So that is the strategy we did. So we found this region. I'm not getting into technical details, but we disturbed this region, and actually the amplitudes came down. So that is the whole idea. So we found the hubs which are actually centrally connected to everything. They're like the cool dudes in social networks, and disturbed them, and we could shut down we could make it stable. Okay, and then we saw that when we did that, the hubs are no longer hubs because we rattled them. Okay, so that is our technology, and it can work very well. We have patent and papers and all this. So over the last decade, with my students, earlier thermoacoustics was a very engineering field, but we actually transformed the subject a bit to actually from a standalone topic, standalone engineering discipline, we have transformed it to an ideal platform for studying critical transition in complex systems. So that was the primary contribution that we made, and we also lots of work has come. Now other people are also working, so I compiled it into a textbook. So turbulent thermoacoustic instability, the height of spatio-temporal complexity. More complex, I would think that a lot of the systems that physicists describe, like lasers and so on, it is complex, but here we have turbulent flow, which is the height of complexity, so it's turbulent reacting flow. And complex system theory itself needs to be advanced to accommodate the complexities of turbulent thermoacoustics, and this is indeed an exciting prospect. So combustion dynamics is complex, but I think I have heard a lot of big shot profs saying this in many talks, even right from the time I was a student. But they actually mean as complicated, not complex as in large number of interacting components and so on. So they will say, I have heard people say that it's a beast. Combustion dynamics is a beast. But what do we do with the beast, our engineering things? We shy away from the complexity. We don't deal with turbulence. We don't deal with scalings. We actually, first of all, we average the fluctuations. And then this is the way we tame the beast. And then we linearize. So in the end, a lion is transformed to a rat or mouse, which thinks is a linearized lion. This is the state of how engineers do thermoacoustics, but it has changed. Now engineers are slowly, it was resistant to change. When I started the subject, people were ridiculing us, but not anymore. Industry actually was the first one to value all these things. Although, one would think that academics would value all these things, but academics, they sit in a room and do all these things and never heard the sound. We hear the sound, and I'm not an academist, I am a hardcore engineer, so I can hear the sound, and then because I was so frustrated with the theory, we made our own, our group made our own theory. So, this mouse, so let combustion dynamics be complex. The very complexity gives us engineering solutions. So complexity is our friend, actually, not our enemy or something. So I would say embrace complexity. Thank you. If there are any questions, I would be very happy to answer. And I think there are mics to people. Yeah, okay. So if you want to ask a question, there are mics. And while I wait for questions, I leave it with a poem I myself wrote. Okay. So there's another way of doing science with poetry. Okay. I'd be very happy to answer questions. Feel free to ask. Worst thing that will happen is I won't know the answer. That's okay. Yeah. Hi, Prabhu.
It's a doubt only. You have done so many experiments and research. This These are all as per your lab conditions. Okay. Your results are all lab conditions.
Yeah.
Now, of course, these are the indications to engine operating conditions. Okay. How close are your lab results to the engine operating conditions?
Okay, so this is a very good point. These things work much better in engine conditions because there's much more turbulence there. So in the lab, we are doing Reynolds number of 10 power 4. But there you will have Reynolds number 10 power 5. There's much more fluctuations, and we thrive on fluctuations. So it works very well. Unfortunately, I cannot show all these things because every time I deal with somebody, be it government or private, I sign this NDAs. So I would probably go to jail if I show my data, but I can only say that it works well. And it has worked well with several different companies, very well actually. Better than the lab actually, I would say. Thank you, sir. Yeah, Prabhu.
Your statement here, sir, and I've been following what you showed also, is that instability is the loss of complexity. That sounds a little bit counterintuitive, isn't it? You sometimes think less complex a system, more stable it will be.
I'm not sure. If you look at nature, nature is very complex, or if you look at a human being or something. So young people, their bodies, their physiology is very complex, and as you age or as you get disease, you actually lose complexity, and the signals lose their complexity. Either you go towards periodicity or you go towards noise. One of these things, and both are ailments. And in the spatio-temporal domain, as in the organs, they actually lose the degrees of freedom. And it loses spatio-temporal complexity as well as temporal complexity. So a healthy heart, actually, if you Google healthy heart, you will see healthy heart is a fractal heart. So if you look at the signal, this thing, you take the peaks. The peak is called, there's a PQRST, peak is R. So they plot time series of RR interval, okay? And then that time series of RR interval is actually multifractal. And that is a healthy heart. And you lose the multifractality in terms of the two ways you can go. So we live in between chaos, this order on one side and noise on another side. In the edge, in between lies the healthy human being. In the edge lies the healthy nature. When you lose that, you are in trouble. So I think it is counterintuitive because man-made things are, this is Euclidean object. This is Euclidean object. But have you seen a tree which is circular or like a box or something? In fact, our body is so well designed, it has actually non-integer dimension because of the percolating nature of this blood vessels. And that's what enables us to function. If it was a Euclidean, we cannot function.
Would you connect complexity to entropy, for example?
Yeah, I wanted to stay out of this. So, but now that you brought it, I will try to say whatever I know. So, in a closed system or isolated system, entropy increases. But in an open system, we are open system. This combustor is an open system and far from equilibrium. It's not equilibrium. If I am in equilibrium, I'm dead, right? I have thermal death, and I just decay. When I die, I will be in equilibrium. But when I'm living, I'm ingesting mass and taking energy. And I'm an open system. So I'm actually letting out the entropy. The body functions by cleansing the entropy it generates through feces and the CO2. And so we are actually having a very nice process in which we keep the entropy in check. So this was the first book on this was by Schrodinger. I forget the name of the book. I have the 2 copies of the book actually. I can give. What is life? Yeah. So life thrives by this. He calls it negentropy. Okay. Now, move some years, and 1970s, Prigogine got Nobel Prize. So these structures are called dissipative structures, where these structures create entropy and all that, fine, but they are orderly structures. And there is mass coming in and energy coming in, or mass going out, energy going out, but in such systems, order can emerge. And within this locally, entropy actually is kept under check. But universe entropy will go up, as of what we understand.
Sure, thank you. Thank you.
So it's an open system thermodynamics. have a feeling that I put everyone to sleep. Sorry about that. Yes. Yeah, just barely mentioned. Yeah. Okay, so complex system is a system with a large number of interacting components. So, and the opposite of that, so complex system approach is an approach in which we focus on the interactions. Now, this is in contrast with reductionist approach, where you think that we can take each component apart, zoom in on the smallest component and understand. So the example we give is water. I've been drinking water. I just started a 2-hour class, so I got exhausted, so I continued to drink water to keep lubrication. But you focus on the molecules of water, and no matter how small you focus, get to molecule, you will not see anything called wetness. Wetness emerges because of the interaction with the molecule and happens on a large scale. Another example I can give is like a stadium where kids are lined up and they sometimes display Indian flag. You cannot zoom in on each kid and find out why this flag is formed. It appears in a step back. So that is because of the interactions. The simple rules can actually give rise to emerging things. Okay. Now, complex network is a tool or a technology whereby it's a subject where this large number of interacting components connecting, they can be modeled, and then you can have statistical mechanics of that. So it connection, for example, airline network, you connect airports, or power grid, you connect power stations and transformers and all that.
What are the interacting components in the thermoacoustic system?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there are a lot of there are different systems. So the hydrodynamic system and the acoustic system and the fluid mechanic, hydrodynamic, acoustics, and combustion. These are the main systems. But within the hydrodynamics, you have turbulent flow. It's a turbulent flow. If it's a laminar flow, it's not a complex system because it's very simple, half bifurcation. So in a turbulent flow has a lot of scales. If you looked at the eddies behind boats or something, you will have large eddies and small eddies, and in between also you'll see. So there are large number of scales and large number of degrees of freedom. So there's a small eddies in which this reaction happens and so on. So those are the components. And then the acoustic wave is another component. But lots of components come from turbulence. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I now request Professor Mahesh to felicitate Professor Sujit.
Yeah, go ahead. There's one more question. Yes, please.
So you said that nature does not prefer order. So can we see that like turbulent flow is more disordered and laminar flow is ordered? So can we say that when the flow is laminar, then that can lead to instability?
You can get instability in laminar flow, but I mean, I think probably I said in a different context. So if you go away from equilibrium, okay, and if you want to put higher pressure delta P and then get the flow, it has to go turbulence because there's no other way. As you go away from the equilibrium, this order is destroyed and this disorder comes. So in nature, all the flows in nature are turbulence. Laminar flow can be created in the laboratory, generally. I mean, maybe there are exceptions. Yeah.
Yes, but like is that somehow related to instability?
Laminar flow can easily lead to instability. So I demonstrated an experiment, right, in which that flame, I think it was laminar pretty much, and it was, and I heated the wire gauze, and the flow around it, after I pulled out the flame, is definitely guaranteed to be laminar. You can get instability. You can get instability in laminar flow, but real systems are turbulence, real engines are turbulence, real systems are turbulence, and I wanted to study that. So laminar system, studying it is quite easy. It is actually there it's classical half bifurcation. So you have there's complete quietness, and then oscillatory solution emerges. Okay, but here you have chaos is the stable during the stable operation chaos, and then order is slowly emerging from that. So that's a different paradigm.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all for listening patiently.
I also invite Professor H.S.N. Moti and Mr. Sridhar to join them for the photograph. For the photograph, sir. Sridhar, sir, you can please. Thank you. I now request Dr. G.A. Ramdas, Director of National Institute of Ocean Technology, to say a few words.
It's a pleasure and privilege for me to be here for various reasons. Actually, I don't need, I need very little persuasion to be here because I was a student of IIT Madras between 96 and 92. And I worked as a scientist in National Institute of Ocean Technology in the same building. We were here for almost 6 to 7 years. So it's my pleasure. And it's an emotional moment for me to be here as a disciple of Professor D Srinivasan. Some people say I'm a student of Professor Srinivasan, but I don't think so. I am actually a disciple. And some people say I'm a creation of Professor Srinivasan, actually, and I'm very proud to be so. And Professor Srinivasan, he started his career, or he started his research in Missouri, and he worked on sonoluminescence. And his first paper was in Nature. It was, I believe, it's only 1 or 2 pages of the paper. That's how he started. Destiny brought him back to India. He worked in NPL first, then he came to NPOL, and rest is history. And even in this IIT, I think he interacted with Professor Indrasen, and he started, introduced the concept of ambient noise, actually. So wherever he went, he lit a flame. And here, when I was a physics student here, I was working on high temperature superconductors in solid state physics. I was using acoustics for characterizing the high temperature superconductors. And my colleague, Dr. Dilshah, who is sitting here, he was working on magnetostrictive materials. Like that one, Dr. Lata, she was working in mathematics. In one seminar, he gave a lecture on acoustics, underwater acoustics, and he asked us, are there any converts here? None of us raised our hands. But later, we really got converted into this religion, actually, this underwater acoustics. And he built careers, he built institutes, he wrote books, and now we know so much about underwater acoustics and oceans only because of him. He not only worked for underwater acoustics, for ocean technology itself he worked, and till his very end he was talking subject to all of us. So we are proud to be associated with him. And when Mr. Sridhar was trying to institute this chair in IIT Bombay, IIT Mumbai, I should say, at the time I requested him, why don't you do it in IIT Madras, where Professor Srinivasan spent a lot of time. So he accepted, and of course, Professor Mahesh was there always, actually, and this chair was instituted. And I'm very happy that Professor Sujit is actually the first professor to occupy this chair, and today's lecture proved that it's the right choice. And once again, I thank all of you, and I didn't expect to speak here, so it is straight from my heart, and it's straight about, and it's all about my Guru, actually. And I hope this will go further, and the moment he started, it will actually, it'll go on, and we need acoustics to see in our seas, and we need acoustics to know more about our oceans. And I say that because, not because I'm just director of the National Institute of Ocean Technology, but I say that conquering inner space, that is oceans, is much more difficult than conquering the outer space. The only tool we have got is acoustics. If you have a good telescope, you can see your Saturn rings. And if you have a good controller, you can even control Mars rover sitting from here. But if you drop something at 20 meters or 10 meters water depth, you can't see it, you cannot control it. You need acoustics. But unfortunately, sound is 2 lakh times slower, and information carrying capacity is very small, and it's very lazy. It tends towards actually the rarer medium and all. So actually it's very difficult to use acoustics. So it's a very complex tool, but that's the only tool we have to explore our oceans. And India needs it very badly, that expertise. And Professor Srinivasan started this field way back in 1960s, and we should be indebted to him. And I thank all authorities of IIT Madras for really instituting this chair in his memory. And it's not easy to just donate around 1 crore rupees. And somebody is actually, however rich one somebody is. And really I'm amazed that Professor Mr. Sridhar came forward and did this one. And I think really it's very generous of him to do it. Okay. With these few words, I really pay homage to my Guru, Professor Srinivasan, and I take leave. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I request Mr. Kaviraj Nair, CEO of the Office of Institutional Advancement, to propose the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute honor for me to be present here and propose a vote of thanks. First and foremost of all, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to Mr. Srinivasan, his family comprising his wife, Mrs. Rita Sridhar, and his son, Mr. Sharanya Sridhar, for funding this chair. It's absolutely such magnanimous gestures from leaders like you, which really add value to the it takes us a long way, right? Like so, and I will be remiss in my responsibilities if I don't remember Dr. Srinivasan on this occasion for his magnificent contributions to the area of acoustics. Sincere gratitude to Dean Professor Mahesh Panjaknula for felicitating and the chief guests here, and of course our sincere thanks to Professor Sujit for accepting this honor with and gracing the occasion, and we are grateful to all of you for attending this function, and to the students, to the faculty members, to all of you. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great evening. Thank you.
Kindly rise for the national anthem. Jana Gana Mana Adinayaka Jaya He Bharat Bhagya Vidata Punjab Sindh Gujarat Maratha Dravida Utkal Vanga Vindhya Himachala Yamuna Ganga Uchchala Jaladhitaranga Tava Shubha Name Jage Tava Shubhashish Mange Gahe Tava Jaya Gata Janagana Mangala Dayak Jaya He Bharat Bhagya Vidata Jaya He Jaya He Jaya He Jaya 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 He. Thank you all. I request all of you to please join us for the high tea in the main dining hall.